The woman stumbled into Buffalo, Wyoming on a cold October morning in 1876. Her dress torn at the hem and her eyes hollow with grief that seemed to have carved itself into her very bones. Olivia Kenmore had walked the last 8 miles after her horse gave out, carrying nothing but a small cloth bag and the weight of mistakes she believed had damned her beyond redemption. The main street stretched before her, dusty and lined with wooden buildings that sagged slightly to one side, as if the weight of all the stories they contained had become too much to bear. Wagons creaked past, and a few townsfolk glanced her way with the kind of curiosity reserved for strangers in small places where everyone knew everyone else's business. She needed work. That much was certain. The coins in her pocket would barely buy a meal, let alone lodging, and winter was coming to the high country with its usual merciless efficiency. Her stomach twisted with hunger and something deeper, something that felt like shame wrapped in layers of regret. The saloon seemed as good a place as any to start asking about employment. She pushed through the swinging doors, her entrance drawing immediate attention from the handful of men scattered throughout the dim interior. The bartender, a heavy-set man with a scar running down his left cheek, looked her up and down with an expression that made her skin crawl. "Looking for work," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Cleaning, cooking, anything respectable." The bartender grunted. "Respectable work is hard to come by for women without references." "Where you coming from?" "Kansas," she lied, because the truth was too complicated and too painful. The truth involved a husband who had beaten her until she could not recognize her own face in the mirror, a desperate escape in the night, and a journey west that had stripped away everything except the determination to survive. "You got family here?" "No." He seemed to consider this, wiping down the bar with a rag that looked like it had seen better days sometime in the previous decade. "Might be able to use someone to help with the cleaning. Pay is not much, and you would need to find your own place to stay." It was better than nothing. Olivia nodded, swallowing her pride along with the lump in her throat. "I will take it." The work was exactly as degrading as she had feared. She scrubbed floors sticky with spilled whiskey and tobacco juice, emptied spittoons that made her gag, and endured the leering comments of drunk men who saw a woman alone and assumed the worst. Each night she collapsed on the thin bedroll she had managed to rent in a tiny room above the general store, her hands raw and her spirit feeling more bruised than her body had ever been. 3 weeks passed in this grinding routine. The days blurred together, marked only by the changing weather that grew progressively colder. She kept to herself, spoke to no one unless necessary, and tried not to think about the future stretching endlessly before her like an empty road leading nowhere. It was on a Tuesday morning, as she was hauling a bucket of dirty water out the back door of the saloon, that she first encountered Austin Grayson. He was tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the weak November sun, and he was attempting to calm a skittish mare tied to the hitching post near where Olivia was working. The horse was clearly distressed, ears pinned back and eyes rolling white. "Easy now," he murmured to the animal, his voice low and soothing. "Nobody is going to hurt you. You are safe here." The gentleness in his tone made Olivia pause despite herself. She had not heard a man speak with such patience in longer than she could remember. She watched as he ran his hand along the mare's neck, his movements slow and deliberate, giving the horse time to understand that he meant no harm. The mare gradually settled, her breathing slowing, her ears pricking forward with cautious interest. Austin reached into his pocket and produced a piece of carrot, offering it on his flat palm. The horse lipped it up delicately, and something that might have been a smile crossed the cowboy's weathered face. It was then that he noticed Olivia standing there with her bucket of filthy water, watching him like some kind of fool. Their eyes met, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. She turned quickly, meaning to go back inside, but her foot caught on an uneven board and she stumbled. The bucket tipped, sloshing its contents across her already stained dress. "Here, let me help." Austin was at her side in 3 long strides, reaching for the bucket. "I do not need help," Olivia said sharply, the words coming out harsher than she intended. She had learned the hard way that accepting help from men always came with a price. He held up his hands, stepping back immediately. "Did not mean to overstep, madam. Just looked like you could use a hand." There was no offense in his expression, no anger at her rebuff. Just a kind of understanding that made her throat tighten unexpectedly. She picked up the bucket herself, gripping the handle hard enough that her knuckles went white. "Thank you anyway," she managed, then fled back into the saloon before he could say anything else. But that was not the last she saw of Austin Grayson. He appeared again the following day, sitting at a corner table with another man who looked to be a rancher, discussing cattle prices and grazing rights. Olivia served them coffee, keeping her eyes down, but she could feel his gaze following her movements. "You are new to Buffalo," he said when his companion stepped away to speak with someone across the room. It was not a question. "Yes," she said shortly, already turning to leave. "It is a good town. Folks here will help if you need it." She almost laughed at that, at the naive assumption that people were fundamentally kind. "I am sure they would," she said, her voice flat with disbelief. He studied her for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. "Someone hurt you," he said quietly. "I am sorry for that." The observation, delivered with such simple sincerity, struck her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and walked away without another word because she did not trust herself to speak without her voice breaking. That night, alone in her rented room, Olivia allowed herself to cry for the first time since arriving in Buffalo. She wept for the girl she had been before her marriage, for the dreams that had died slowly under her husband's fists, for the future that seemed to hold nothing but more of the same grinding survival. She cried until her eyes were swollen and her throat ached, and then she lay awake in the darkness, listening to the wind rattle the loose window pane. Austin continued to appear at the saloon with increasing frequency. Sometimes he came with ranch hands from the spread where he worked, sometimes alone. He always treated her with the same gentle courtesy, never pushing, never demanding more than she was willing to give. He said good morning and thank you, and once when another patron grabbed her wrist and tried to pull her into his lap, Austin was there in an instant. "Let her go," he said, his voice still quiet but carrying a steel edge that made the drunk man release her immediately. Olivia rubbed her wrist, her heart hammering. "I can handle myself," she said, but the words lacked conviction. "I know you can," Austin replied, "but you should not have to." The simplicity of that statement stayed with her for days. The idea that she should not have to endure cruelty, that her suffering was not some inevitable consequence of being a woman alone in the world, felt revolutionary and terrifying in equal measure. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing snow that piled high against the buildings and turned the streets into treacherous rivers of frozen mud. The saloon grew busier as men sought warmth and company, and Olivia's workload increased accordingly. She developed a cough that rattled in her chest, but she could not afford to rest, could not afford to lose even a single day's pay. She was scrubbing tables late one evening, the saloon finally empty except for the bartender counting receipts in the back room, when Austin walked in. He was covered in snow, his coat white with it, and he stamped his boots at the threshold before approaching her. "We are closed," she said automatically. "I am not here for a drink." He pulled off his hat, snow cascading from the brim. "I heard you have been sick." "I am fine." The lie was undermined by the cough that seized her immediately after speaking, bending her double with its force. When she straightened, Austin was frowning. "You need to see a doctor." "I need to work," she corrected. "Doctors cost money I do not have." "Then let me pay for it." "No." The refusal was instant and absolute. "I do not take charity." "It is not charity. It is one person helping another." "It is the same thing." She turned back to her scrubbing, her movements jerky with irritation and something that felt uncomfortably like longing. How easy it would be to accept his help, to let someone else carry the burden for just a moment. How dangerous. Austin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My mother used to tell me that pride keeps you warm until the first hard frost, and then it will let you freeze to death." She was a stubborn woman, and she nearly died proving that point one winter when I was a boy. Refused to ask the neighbors for help when our cabin burned and we had nowhere to go. My father finally swallowed his pride and knocked on doors, and folks came through for us. Saved our lives. Despite herself, Olivia found herself listening. She could picture it, a younger Austin standing in the snow, watching his parents struggle with the same impossible choice between dignity and survival. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I see that same stubbornness in you. That same determination to do everything alone, to prove you do not need anyone. And I understand it, I truly do. But understanding it does not make it any less dangerous." She set down her scrub brush, her hands trembling slightly. "You do not know anything about me. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you have been hurt badly enough that you flinch when men raise their voices. I know you are sick and getting sicker because you cannot afford to stop long enough to heal." He paused. "And I know you deserve better than this." The words hit her like stones, each one finding a tender spot she had been trying to protect. "You are wrong," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not deserve anything. You do not know what I have done, the mistakes I have made." "Everyone deserves love," Austin said firmly. "Especially you, right now, today." The certainty in his voice made her want to believe him, and that wanting was the most frightening thing of all. She shook her head, taking a step back. "You should go. Will you at least think about seeing the doctor?" "I will think about it," she lied, knowing she would do no such thing. He studied her face for a moment longer, then nodded and put his hat back on. "Good night, Olivia." The sound of her name in his mouth, spoken with such warmth, nearly undid her. She waited until he had left before sinking into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. The cough came again, harder this time, and when she pulled her hand away from her mouth there were flecks of blood on her palm. Fear cut through her exhaustion. She knew what blood meant, knew the stories of people who had died from lung sickness in the harsh Wyoming winters. But what could she do? She had no money, no options, nothing but the threadbare determination that had carried her this far. The next morning, she woke to find a small envelope had been slid under her door. Inside was enough money to see the doctor 3 times over, along with a note written in careful block letters. "This is not charity. Consider it a loan if you must. Pay me back when you can. Please take care of yourself." It was not signed, but she knew who it was from. The gesture brought tears to her eyes, tears she angrily wiped away before they could fall. She stared at the money for a long time, her mind at war with itself. Pride demanded she return it immediately. Practicality whispered that she might actually die without treatment. And somewhere beneath both of those voices was a smaller, quieter sound, like a door opening to let in light after years of darkness. She went to the doctor that afternoon. The diagnosis was pneumonia, caught early enough to treat but serious enough to require rest and medicine. The doctor, An older man with kind eyes gave her strict instructions to stay warm and dry, to take the tonic he prescribed 3 times daily, and to absolutely not continue working in her current conditions. "If you do not rest, this will get worse," he warned. "Pneumonia does not care about your work schedule. It will kill you just as dead whether you can afford to be sick or not." Olivia thanked him and left with the bottle of foul-tasting medicine, her mind already calculating how much work she would miss and how far behind on rent that would put her. But when she returned to the saloon to explain her situation to the bartender, she found Austin waiting outside. "How did you know I would be here?" she asked. "I did not. I have been checking every few hours since this morning." He gestured to the saloon. "Were you planning to go back to work?" "I have to. The doctor said rest. I am guessing." She did not ask how he knew. "I cannot afford to rest." Austin took a deep breath as if bracing himself. "I have a proposal. Hear me out before you say no." Everything in Olivia's body tensed, preparing for disappointment or worse. "What kind of proposal?" "The ranch where I work, the Double J, belongs to an older couple named Jim and Janet Morrison. They have been looking for someone to help Janet with the housework. She has arthritis in her hands, makes it hard for her to do all the things she used to. The job would include room and board plus wages. Light work, nothing that would strain you while you recover." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "Why would they hire someone they have never met?" "Because I recommended you. I told them you were the hardest worker in Buffalo, honest and dependable, and that you needed a situation better than what you have now." "You had no right to do that," Olivia said, anger flaring hot in her chest. "You do not know me well enough to make promises on my behalf." "You are right," Austin said calmly. "I overstepped, but the offer stands regardless. Janet wants to meet you, at least. What you decide after that is entirely up to you." She wanted to refuse on principle, to tell him to mind his own business and leave her alone. But the thought of another night in that freezing room above the general store, another day of scrubbing floors while her lungs burned, was suddenly more than she could bear. When would she want to meet? The question came out grudging. Each word pulled from her like a tooth. "Tomorrow, if you are feeling up to it, I can drive you out to the ranch. I can get there myself." "I am sure you can," Austin said with infinite patience. "But it is 6 miles in the snow and you have pneumonia. Let me help, Olivia, just this once." She wanted to keep fighting, to maintain the walls she had built so carefully around herself. But she was so tired, and he was offering something she had not had in so long. A genuine kindness with no apparent strings attached. "Fine," she said at last. "Tomorrow." The relief on his face was unmistakable. "I will pick you up at 9 if that suits you." She nodded, already turning away before he could see how close she was to tears again. What was wrong with her? She had survived worse than this. She had endured things that should have broken her completely. Yet this simple act of decency from a man she barely knew was crumbling her defenses faster than any cruelty ever had. That night, she lay awake again, but this time her thoughts were not dark spirals of despair. Instead, she found herself thinking about Austin's hands on the frightened horse, the gentle patience in his voice. She thought about the way he had stood up for her without making her feel weak, the way he offered help without demanding anything in return. She thought about the possibility, fragile as spun glass, that maybe the world held more than just suffering. The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Olivia dressed in her least worn dress, braided her dark hair as neatly as she could manage, and waited by the window. At precisely 9 o'clock, she saw Austin pull up in a wagon, the bed filled with fresh hay and covered with a tarp to keep out the snow. She met him outside, not wanting him to see the barren room where she lived. He helped her up onto the seat without comment, then tucked a thick blanket around her legs. "It is a cold ride," he explained when she looked at him questioningly. "Janet would have my hide if I brought you to the ranch half frozen." They set off through Buffalo's Main Street, the wagon wheels crunching through the packed snow. The town was just waking up, smoke rising from chimneys in thin gray columns against the pale sky. Olivia clutched the blanket around herself and tried to ignore how aware she was of Austin's presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the easy competence with which he handled the reins. "Tell me about the Morrisons," she said, needing to fill the silence with something other than her own racing thoughts. "Jim and Janet have run the Double J for nearly 30 years, Austin began. "They never had children of their own, which I think is their one great sorrow. But they have been good to me and the other hands. Fair wages, decent food, and they treat us like people rather than just labor. Jim is slowing down, same as Janet. They are both in their 60s now, and the ranch is getting to be too much for them. I think they are considering selling in a few years, moving somewhere warmer." "How long have you worked there?" 5 years this spring. "I came to Wyoming from Colorado, looking for work after my father died. Jim gave me a chance when other ranchers would not because I was only 20 and looked younger. I owe him a lot." Olivia did some quick arithmetic in her head. That made Austin 25 now, only 2 years older than herself. Somehow she had assumed he was older, perhaps because of the steadiness he carried, the sense that he was comfortable in his own skin in a way she had never managed to be. "What about you?" Austin asked. "Where are you from originally?" the question she had been dreading. "Missouri," she said, which was true enough. "I came west to start over, running from something or toward something. Too perceptive by half. Does it matter? Not to me," he said simply. "Everyone has a past. What matters is what you do going forward. If only it were that simple. If only she could believe that her past would not chase her down eventually, that she could truly start fresh and leave all the pain and mistakes behind. But she had learned that the past was patient. It waited, gathering strength, and then it struck when you finally allowed yourself to feel safe." The ranch appeared in the distance, a collection of sturdy buildings nestled in a valley protected from the worst of the wind. Smoke rose from the main house, and Olivia could see cattle clustered near the windbreak, dark shapes against the white snow. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic, and that frightened her more than any amount of hardship ever could. Peace was dangerous. Peace made you soft, made you vulnerable to the next blow. Austin pulled the wagon up to the house and helped her down. Before they could knock, the door swung open to reveal a woman with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, her face lined with wrinkles that spoke of years of smiling. "You must be Olivia," Janet Morrison said warmly. Come in before you freeze solid out there." "Austin, go help Jim with whatever he is fussing about in the barn. I want to talk to this young lady myself." Austin touched his hat brim to Olivia, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, then headed off toward the barn. Olivia followed Janet into the house, grateful for the rush of warm air that greeted her. The interior was cozy without being cluttered, everything neat and well-maintained. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Janet led her to a wooden table in the kitchen and gestured for her to sit. "I will make us some tea," Janet said, already moving toward the stove despite the obvious stiffness in her movements. "Austin tells me you have been working at the saloon in town. Hard work, that." "It paid enough to survive," Olivia said carefully. "Surviving and living are not the same thing, I have found." Janet poured hot water into a teapot, her gnarled fingers moving slowly but surely. "I asked Austin to find me someone who needed help as much as I needed help. He said you fit that description. Olivia was not sure how to respond to such directness. I do need work, but I will not take charity. Good, because I am not offering it. Janet brought the tea to the table and sat down with a small grunt of effort. My hands are not what they used to be. The arthritis makes it hard to cook, clean, do the mending. I need someone capable and reliable. In exchange, I can offer a private room in this house, 3 meals a day and wages of $12 a month. The work would be cooking, cleaning, laundry, and helping me with the kitchen garden come spring. Does that sound acceptable? $12 a month was more than Olivia had been making at the saloon, and that did not even account for room and board. It was almost too generous. Why would you pay so much for a stranger? Because I believe in paying fair wages for fair work, Janet said firmly. And because Austin trusts you, which means something to me. That boy has good instincts about people. He barely knows me. Sometimes it does not take long to see the measure of a person. Janet poured tea into 2 cups, her eyes shrewd but not unkind. He told me you have been sick. How are you feeling? The doctor gave me medicine. I will be fine with rest. Then your first week here will be light duty only. I need you healthy, not work to death trying to prove something. She pushed a cup of tea across the table. Now, are you going to tell me what you are really afraid of, or are we going to dance around it all afternoon? The bluntness startled a laugh out of Olivia, short and bitter. I am afraid that this will turn out to be too good to be true. I am afraid that I will fail somehow, or that there is some catch I am not seeing. I'm afraid of accepting help because every time I have trusted someone before, it ended badly. Janet nodded slowly, as if this was exactly the answer she had expected. I cannot promise you that nothing will ever go wrong. Life has a way of throwing trouble at us whether we are ready or not. But I can promise you that Jim and I are honest people who treat others with respect. If you work hard, you will always have a place here. And if someday you decide to move on, we will not hold it against you. Is that fair enough? It was more than fair. It was the kind of straightforward decency that Olivia had almost forgotten existed. She felt the familiar prickle of tears and blinked hard to keep them at bay. When would you want me to start? She asked. Today, if you are willing. Austin can bring your things from town tomorrow. It was happening so fast, too fast, and yet Olivia found herself nodding. Today is fine. Janet smiled, and it transformed her whole face. Wonderful. Let me show you to your room, and then we can go over the household routine. The room was small but clean, with a real bed covered in a thick quilt, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the snowy valley. Olivia stood in the doorway, taking it in, and felt something crack open inside her chest. This was hers, at least for now. A space where she could close the door and be alone, where she would be warm and safe. It is not fancy, Janet said, but the roof does not leak and the fireplace draws well. I hope it will do. It is perfect, Olivia whispered, meaning it with every fiber of her being. The first weeks at the Double J passed in a blur of learning new routines and slowly recovering her health. The medicine worked, her cough gradually fading until it disappeared entirely. Janet proved to be a patient teacher, showing Olivia how she liked the household run without being overbearing about it. They fell into an easy partnership, working together in the kitchen, or sitting by the fire in the evenings while Janet mended, and Olivia read aloud from whatever book they had on hand. Jim Morrison was a quiet man, tall and weathered like an old fence post, but with a dry sense of humor that caught Olivia off guard. He treated her with the same courtesy he showed his wife, never making her feel like a servant despite her position in the household. And then there was Austin. He was around the ranch constantly, of course, working with the cattle or repairing fences or performing any of the 100 other tasks that kept the Double J running. Olivia saw him at meals, when all the ranch hands ate together at the big table in the kitchen. She saw him in the yard, his breath misting in the cold air as he worked. She saw him in the barn when she went to collect eggs from the hens. He was always respectful, always kind, and her awareness of him grew with each passing day until it felt like a physical thing, a magnetic pull she had to actively resist. She caught herself watching for him, listening for his voice, finding excuses to be where he might be. It was dangerous and foolish, and she tried desperately to stop, but her heart seemed to have its own ideas about what was wise. Christmas came, and with it a heavy snowstorm that trapped them all inside for 3 days. Janet taught Olivia how to make her special spice cookies, and Jim told stories about the old days when Wyoming was even wilder than it was now. The ranch hands played cards and sang songs, their voices rising in rough harmony that filled the house with warmth. Austin sat near the fireplace, whittling something from a piece of wood, and Olivia found herself drawn to sit nearby, ostensibly to work on the mending but really just to be in his presence. They did not talk much, but the silence between them felt comfortable, companionable in a way she had never experienced before. On Christmas evening, after the others had gone to bed, she found him still by the fire, staring into the flames. "Cannot sleep?" she asked softly. He looked up, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Thinking too much, I guess. You, the same." She sat down in the chair Janet had vacated earlier, tucking her skirts around her legs. "I have been meaning to thank you. For what? For everything. For paying the doctor, for bringing me here, for giving me a chance at something better. I do not think I ever properly thanked you." "You do not owe me thanks, Olivia. I am just glad you are somewhere safe now. But I do owe you. You changed my life." She paused, gathering courage. "Why did you do it? You did not know me. I gave you no reason to care what happened to me." Austin set down his whittling, giving her his full attention. "Do you remember that mare I was calming the first time we talked?" She nodded. "Someone had beaten that horse." You could see it in the way she flinched, the way she expected every touch to be a blow. It made me sick to think about what she had endured. He met Olivia's eyes. "I saw the same thing in you, that same expectation of pain, and I thought if I could help one, maybe I could help the other." The comparison should have offended her, but somehow it did not. There was truth in it, painful truth. "I am not a horse that needs gentling." "No," he agreed. "You are a woman who deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. And I am a man who believes everyone deserves a chance at happiness, especially those who have known the opposite." There it was again, that simple certainty that she was worthy of good things. It made her want to argue, to list all the reasons he was wrong, but the words would not come. Instead, she found herself saying, "I was married before. To a man who hurt me in ways I am still learning to understand. I left him, which makes me a runaway wife. Some would say I am still married in the eyes of God and the law." Austin was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Did you make vows to a man who beat you?" "Yes." "Then those vows were broken the first time he raised his hand to you, not when you left. You have nothing to feel guilty about. The law might see it differently. Then the law is wrong." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "Olivia, I do not care about your past. I care about who you are now, who you are becoming. I see a strong, brave woman who survived something terrible and kept going. That is who you are to me." The words settled over her like a blessing, like forgiveness she had not known she was seeking. She felt tears slip down her cheeks and did not bother to wipe them away. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am afraid to believe this is real, that I could actually have a life here. I am afraid to trust you, even though you have never given me reason not to. I am afraid that I am broken in ways that cannot be fixed." Austin rose and crossed to her chair, kneeling beside it so they were eye to eye. "You are not broken. You are healing. There is a difference." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "I am not asking you to trust me all at once. I am just asking you to let me prove that I am worthy of that trust, one day at a time." His hand was warm and calloused from work, solid and real. Olivia looked down at their joined hands and felt something shift inside her, like ice breaking up on a river in spring. She was not ready to call it love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. Hope, maybe, possibility. "One day at a time," she repeated softly. "I think I can do that." He smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a storm. "That is all I ask." They sat like that for a long time, hands linked, the fire burning low beside them. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Olivia felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. Winter deepened, and with it came the hard work of keeping the ranch running through the bitter cold. Olivia threw herself into her duties with renewed energy, grateful for the purpose they gave her. She learned to bake bread that rose light and fluffy, to make stews that stuck to the ribs on frigid days, to darn socks so neatly the mend was almost invisible. But more than that, she began to learn what it meant to be part of a community. Janet included her in conversations as an equal, asking her opinions and actually listening to her answers. Jim complimented her cooking and thanked her for her hard work. The other ranch hands treated her with friendly respect, and slowly, so slowly she barely noticed it happening, she began to relax around them. And Austin was simply there, a constant presence that felt increasingly essential. They talked while she hung laundry and he mended tack nearby. They sat together during meals, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the philosophical. He told her about his childhood in Colorado, about his mother who had died when he was 15, and his father who had never quite recovered from the loss. She found herself sharing small pieces of her own past in return, carefully edited but more honest than she had been with anyone in years. January brought a cold snap so severe that the water in the troughs froze solid every night. The men took turns breaking the ice each morning, their breath hanging in clouds as they worked. Olivia watched from the kitchen window as Austin swung the heavy mallet, his movements economical and practiced, and felt her heart do a strange little flip in her chest. She was falling in love with him. The realization came to her one morning as she was kneading bread dough, her hands moving in the rhythmic push and fold Janet had taught her. She was falling in love with his kindness, his patience, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She was falling in love with his laugh, rare but genuine, and the way he listened when she talked, really listened like her words mattered. It terrified her. Love had nearly destroyed her once before. She had loved her husband in the beginning before the mask slipped and she saw what lay beneath. She had learned the hard way that love could be a trap, a weapon used against you. How could she trust these feelings? How could she be sure Austin was what he seemed and not just another beautiful lie? But as the days passed, and he continued to be exactly who he had always been, steady and true and kind, her fear began to compete with something stronger. Want, need, the desperate hunger to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be different. It was Valentine's Day, not that anyone made much of it on the ranch when things came to a head. Olivia was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Austin came in from the cold, his face red from the wind. "Olivia, do you have a moment?" he asked, unusually hesitant. "Of course." She wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly nervous without knowing why. He pulled something from his pocket, a small object wrapped in cloth. "I made this for you. It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small carved wooden bird, a finch, its details so delicate she could see individual feathers. It fit perfectly in her palm, smooth and warm. "Austin, this is beautiful," she breathed. "That is what I was whittling on Christmas," he explained, looking embarrassed. "I thought you might like it. Finches are tough little birds. They survive the hardest winters, and come spring they sing. Reminded me of you." The gift, the thought behind it, the way he was looking at her, all of it combined to crack something open inside her. She set the bird carefully on the table and then, before she could think better of it, stepped forward and kissed him. It was brief, chaste, just the press of her lips against his. But it was deliberate, her choice, her action. When she pulled back, Austin's eyes were wide with surprise. "I am sorry," she stammered. "I should not have done that without asking." "You can kiss me any time you want," he said, his voice rough. "But Olivia, I need to know. What do you want from this, from me?" It was a fair question, and she owed him an honest answer. "I do not know yet," she admitted. "I know that I care for you. I know that when I am with you, I feel safe in a way I never have before. I know that I think about you constantly, and that scares me because the last time I felt anything like this, it ended in pain. But I also know that you are not him, that you have proven over and over that you are good and kind and trustworthy. I want to try, Austin. I want to see if I can be brave enough to let myself love you." "You are already the bravest person I know," he said, reaching up to cup her face gently. "And I am already in love with you. I have been for months now. So take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." She kissed him again, slower this time, letting herself feel it. His lips were soft and warm, and he held her like she was made of spun glass, precious and fragile. When they finally pulled apart, she was trembling. "We should probably talk to Jim and Janet," she said practically, trying to ground herself. "I do not want there to be any impropriety." Austin laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Janet has been predicting this since Christmas. I think she will be thrilled." He was right. When they approached the Morrisons that evening, Janet actually clapped her hands together in delight. "Finally," she said. "I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever." "Jim, you owe me $1. You bet on us," Olivia asked, torn between amusement and embarrassment. "Of course we did," Jim said with a grin, handing his wife a coin. "Janet said you would be together by Valentine's Day. I figured it would take until spring." The easy acceptance, the happiness they showed at the news made Olivia's throat tight. This was what family felt like, she realized. This sense of belonging, of being celebrated rather than tolerated. "We want to do this properly," Austin said. "With respect for Olivia's position in this household." "Meaning no sneaking around," Janet said firmly. "You can court her openly, Austin, but I expect you to behave like a gentleman." "Yes, madam," he said seriously, though his eyes were dancing, and so began the courtship, old-fashioned and sweet. Austin brought Olivia wildflowers when the first brave blooms pushed through the snow in March. They took walks together in the evening, always within sight of the house, talking about everything and nothing. He held her hand, and she let him, marveling at how such a simple touch could make her feel so cherished. April brought the spring thaw, and with it, a letter forwarded to Olivia from the post office in Buffalo. She recognized the handwriting immediately, and her blood turned to ice. Her husband had found her. She read the letter in the privacy of her room, her hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. He demanded she return home immediately. He promised that he had changed, that things would be different. He said he loved her. And then, in the final paragraph, the threats began. If she did not come back willingly, he would come for her. He knew where she was. She could not hide from him forever. Olivia barely made it to the chamber pot before she was sick, heaving up the breakfast she had eaten hours before. When there was nothing left, she sat on the floor, the letter crushed in her fist, and tried to breathe through the panic. She had been foolish to think she could escape. Foolish to believe she deserved the happiness she had found here. Her past had caught up with her, just as she had always known it would. There was a soft knock at the door. "Olivia, are you all right? You missed lunch." Janet's voice, concerned and kind, she could not answer. Could not find words past the terror choking her. The door opened a crack. "Olivia, dear, you are scaring me. Can I come in?" She must have made some sound of assent because Janet entered, closing the door behind her. She took one look at Olivia on the floor and immediately knelt beside her. Arthritis be damned. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Wordlessly, Olivia handed her the crumpled letter. Janet read it, her expression growing harder with each line. "This man is your husband," she said. It was not a question. "Yes. The one who beat you. Yes." Janet set the letter aside and pulled Olivia into a fierce hug. "He is not taking you back, do you hear me? Over my dead body." The sheer certainty in her voice penetrated Olivia's panic. She clung to the older woman, sobbing like a child. "He knows where I am. He will come for me. Let him try. This is Wyoming territory and we take care of our own. You are under our protection now. You do not understand. He will not give up. He thinks I am his property. Then we will make him understand differently." Janet pulled back, her eyes blazing with a protective fury Olivia had never seen before. "We need to tell Jim and Austin, and we need to speak to the sheriff in Buffalo. There are laws against a man terrorizing his wife, even here. I do not want to bring trouble to you and Jim. You have been so good to me." "Nonsense. Trouble found you through no fault of your own. Now we deal with it together." She helped Olivia to her feet. "Come on. The men need to know about this." The conversation that followed was one of the hardest of Olivia's life. She had to lay bare the full extent of her past, the marriage to Thomas Kelly in Missouri 3 years ago, the escalating violence, the night she finally fled with nothing but the clothes on her back. She had to describe the fear she had lived with every day, never knowing when his mood would turn, walking on eggshells in her own home. Austin listened with his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Jim's expression grew grimmer with each detail. And when she finished, there was a long silence. "I am sorry," Olivia whispered. "I should have told you all this before." "You have nothing to apologize for," Jim said firmly, "but we need a plan. If this Thomas Kelly is determined enough to track you all the way to Wyoming, he is not going to be dissuaded by a simple warning." "I will go to Buffalo tomorrow," Austin said. "Talk to Sheriff Morrison, see what legal options we have." "Morrison is your surname too," Olivia said, confused. "Different family, same name," Austin explained. "Happens a lot out here, but he is a good man, fair. If there is a way to protect you through the law, he will know it. And if there is not," Austin's eyes met hers and she saw steel beneath the kindness, "then we protect you anyway." The next week passed in tense waiting. Austin made the trip to Buffalo and returned with disappointing news. Since Olivia was legally married to Thomas Kelly, the law saw her as his wife with few rights of her own. The sheriff could do nothing unless Thomas actually committed a crime on Wyoming soil, and threatening letters did not qualify. "So I am just supposed to wait for him to show up?" Olivia asked, feeling the hope drain out of her. "No," Austin said. "We are going to make sure you are never alone, never vulnerable. And if he does show up, he will find out that Wyoming territory is not Missouri." True to his word, Austin made sure someone was always nearby when Olivia went about her tasks. He worked closer to the house. The other ranch hands made excuses to be around more often. Jim started carrying his rifle everywhere, even just to walk to the barn. The protection was comforting but also suffocating. Olivia felt like a prisoner again, her movements restricted, her freedom curtailed. She knew everyone meant well, but the constant vigilance was a reminder that she was not truly safe, not truly free. It was early May when Thomas Kelly finally arrived in Buffalo. Word came through a ranch hand who had been in town picking up supplies. A man matching Thomas's description had been asking around about Olivia, claiming to be her husband looking for his wayward wife. "He is at the hotel," the ranch hand reported. "Told folks he would be paying a visit to the Double J real soon." "Like hell he will," Jim said. He turned to Olivia, his expression serious. "I know this is hard, but I need you to stay in the house. Do not go outside for any reason. Can you do that?" She nodded, fear making her numb. It was happening. After months of peace, her nightmare was catching up with her. That night she could not sleep. She paced her small room, jumping at every sound, imagining Thomas lurking in every shadow. Near midnight there was a soft tap at her door. "Olivia, it is me." Austin's voice, low and reassuring. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, fully dressed despite the late hour. "I could not sleep either," he admitted. "Thought you might want company." They went downstairs to the kitchen, where Olivia made tea more for something to do with her hands than from any desire to drink it. They sat across from each other at the table, the lamp burning low between them. "I am sorry for bringing this into your life," she said quietly. "You did not bring anything. He did. There is a difference." Austin reached across the table and took her hand. "Olivia, no matter what happens, I want you to know something. I love you. I want to marry you, build a life with you, grow old together. But even if the law says you are still married to him, that does not change how I feel. If we have to wait years for a legal divorce, I will wait. If we have to go somewhere else to start over, I will go with you. You are not facing this alone." The declaration, so fierce and certain, made her eyes burn with tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I wish I had been brave enough to say it before now. You are saying it now. That is what matters." They sat together in the quiet kitchen until dawn began to lighten the sky, hands linked across the table, drawing strength from each other. Thomas Kelly arrived at the Double J 2 days later, driving a rented wagon and wearing a smile that did not reach his eyes. Olivia watched from the window as Jim and Austin went out to meet him, both men armed with rifles held casually but ready. She could not hear what was said, but she saw Thomas's expression shift from false friendliness to anger when he realized he would not be allowed near the house. The conversation grew heated. Thomas gestured angrily. Jim shook his head, implacable. Austin stood slightly behind Jim, his hand on his rifle, his stance that of a man ready for violence if necessary. Finally, Thomas threw up his hands and climbed back into the wagon, whipping the horses into motion. But as he drove away, he turned and looked directly at the window where Olivia stood. Even from a distance, she could see the rage in his face, the promise that this was not over. She stepped back from the window, her heart pounding. Jim and Austin came inside, looking grim. "He says he has legal right to you," Jim reported. "I told him you were under our protection and he needed to leave. He did not take it well." "He will be back," Olivia said with certainty. "He does not give up, ever." "Neither do we," Austin said firmly, but the waiting was agonizing. A week passed with no sign of Thomas. Then, too, Olivia began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had given up and gone back to Missouri. It seemed too good to be true, and her instincts told her it was. She was proven right on a Tuesday evening in late May. Most of the ranch hands had gone into Buffalo for supplies, leaving only Jim, Janet, Austin, and one other hand named Samuel at the ranch. Olivia was helping Janet with dinner when they heard horses approaching fast. Austin appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Get away from the windows. Now." His tone brooked no argument. Olivia and Janet moved to the interior hallway while the men positioned themselves at strategic points. Through the window, Olivia could see Thomas approaching with 3 other men, all of them armed. "Olivia Kelly," Thomas shouted from the yard. "Come out here. You are my wife and you are coming home with me." Jim opened the door but stood blocking the threshold, his rifle in hand. "You need to leave, Kelly. This is private property and you are not welcome." "I am not leaving without my wife. She belongs to me." "She is not property," Austin said from his position by the window, "and she does not want to go with you. I do not care what she wants. The law says she is mine." Thomas's voice was rising, the familiar edge of violence creeping in. "Now send her out or we will come in and get her." "You are welcome to try," Jim said calmly, "but I should warn you, we are all armed and we are all excellent shots. You might get into this house, but I guarantee you will not get back out alive." The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Olivia pressed herself against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. She could not let these good people risk their lives for her. She could not let Austin die because of her mistakes. She started to move toward the door, but Janet grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "Do not even think about it," the older woman hissed. "You set 1 foot out there and he will take you and probably kill everyone here anyway. Stay put. I cannot let them die for me. And I cannot let you throw your life away. Trust them, Olivia. Trust that they can handle this." Outside, Thomas was losing patience. He raised his gun, pointing it at Jim. "Last chance. Send her out or people start dying." The shot, when it came, echoed like thunder across the valley. But it was not Thomas who fired. It was Sheriff Morrison, arriving with a group of men from Buffalo, who shot the gun right out of Thomas's hand. "Drop your weapons," the sheriff ordered. "All of you. You are on private land, making threats with firearms. That is serious enough to arrest you right here and now." Thomas clutched his injured hand, his face contorted with rage and pain. "She is my wife. I have a right to her." "You have the right to petition for her return through the courts," Sheriff Morrison said. "What you do not have the right to do is show up with armed men and make threats. Now drop the weapons, or my men will drop you." Faced with superior numbers and legal authority, Thomas and his companions had no choice but to comply. The sheriff's men collected the weapons and restrained the 4 men. Sheriff Morrison approached the house. "It is safe to come out now, Jim." Olivia followed the others onto the porch, her legs shaking so badly she had to hold onto Austin's arm for support. She looked at Thomas, who stared back at her with such venom she flinched. "You will regret this," he spat. "I will make you sorry you ever defied me." "That sounds like another threat," the sheriff observed. "I think we have enough to hold you for a while, Kelly. Give folks time to figure out the legal situation." He tipped his hat to Olivia. "Madam, I suggest you speak to a lawyer about obtaining a divorce. In the meantime, I will keep this gentleman as my guest in Buffalo." "On what charges?" Thomas demanded. "I have done nothing wrong. Trespassing, making threats with a deadly weapon, disturbing the peace. That will do for a start." The sheriff gestured to his men. "Take them in." As Thomas was led away, still shouting threats and curses, Olivia felt her knees give out. Austin caught her, holding her upright, and she buried her face in his chest. "It is over," he murmured. "You are safe now." But was it really over? Thomas was in jail for now, but the sheriff was right. She needed a legal divorce, needed to sever the ties that bound her to that monster. And that would take time and money, neither of which she had much of. In the days that followed, Jim and Janet insisted on paying for a lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, who had recently arrived in Buffalo from Boston. She listened to Olivia's story with a clinical detachment that somehow made it easier to tell, taking careful notes. Wyoming Territory has more progressive laws regarding women and marriage than many places, Mrs. Hendricks explained. The fact that your husband was physically abusive gives us strong grounds for divorce. His recent actions, showing up with armed men to threaten you, strengthen our case considerably. I believe we can obtain a decree of divorce within 6 months, possibly less. What if he fights it? Let him try. His own behavior has provided all the evidence we need, and Sheriff Morrison is willing to testify about the incident at the ranch. She closed her notebook. Miss Kenmore, you may have felt powerless in your marriage, but here in Wyoming, the law is on your side. The divorce proceedings began in June. True to Mrs. Hendricks's prediction, Thomas fought every step of the way, but his own actions had doomed his case. The judge, a stern woman named Judith Harrison who had no patience for men who abused their wives, heard the evidence and made her ruling swiftly. Divorce granted on grounds of cruelty and abandonment of marital duties, she declared in late July. Mr. Kelly, you are hereby ordered to stay at least 100 miles away from Miss Kenmore at all times. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and imprisonment. Just like that, Olivia was free. Legally, truly free for the first time in years. She walked out of the courthouse in Buffalo with Austin beside her and felt like she was floating. I am not married anymore, she said wonderingly. I am actually free of him. Austin stopped right there on the wooden sidewalk and turned to face her. Then I have a question to ask you, and I want to do it properly. To her shock, he dropped to one knee right there in the middle of town. A few passers-by stopped to watch, smiling. Olivia Kenmore, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that love does not have to hurt. Will you marry me? She was crying and laughing at the same time, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Yes, she said. Yes, of course I will marry you. He stood and kissed her right there in the street, and the small crowd that had gathered applauded. Olivia felt like she was living in a dream, the good kind, the kind she had thought were impossible. They were married in September, in a simple ceremony at the Buffalo church with Jim and Janet as witnesses. Olivia wore a dress Janet had helped her sew, pale blue with white lace at the collar and cuffs. Austin wore his best suit, his hair slicked back and his eyes full of love. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Austin kissed her, Olivia felt the last pieces of her broken heart click back into place. This was what love was supposed to be. This tenderness, this respect, this joy. Jim and Janet threw them a party at the ranch, inviting what seemed like half of Buffalo. There was music and dancing and more food than Olivia had ever seen in one place. She danced with Austin until her feet hurt, then danced some more because she could not bear to let go of him. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had left, she found herself alone with Janet in the kitchen, cleaning up the remains of the celebration. I am so happy, Olivia said softly. I did not think I was allowed to be this happy. Everyone deserves happiness, dear. You just had to find the right person to share it with. Janet smiled. Austin is a good man. He will take care of you. I know he will. But the wonderful thing is I can take care of myself now too. I do not need him to rescue me. I just want him because I love him. That is exactly how it should be, Janet said with satisfaction. Austin and Olivia moved into a small house on the edge of the Double J property, a wedding gift from Jim and Janet. It was only 3 rooms, but it was theirs, and they made it into a home together. Olivia continued to help Janet with the housework, but now she had her own household to tend as well, her own space to shape and nurture. The first year of marriage was an education in what love could be when it was healthy and mutual. Austin was patient with her fears, understanding when the memories of her first marriage surfaced at unexpected times. He never raised his voice in anger, never made her feel small or worthless, never demanded more than she was ready to give. And slowly, so slowly, Olivia learned to trust again. Not just him, but herself. She learned that she could be loved without losing herself. She learned that marriage could be a partnership rather than a prison. She learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. In the spring of 1878, she discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. What if she was not a good mother? What if the baby inherited her fears? What if something went wrong? Austin held her as she cried, overwhelmed by the magnitude of bringing a new life into the world. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he said firmly, "and I am going to be right there beside you every step of the way." Their son was born in November, a healthy boy with Austin's blue eyes and Olivia's dark hair. They named him William, after Austin's father, and Olivia fell in love all over again the moment she held him. The early months of motherhood were exhausting and wonderful and terrifying all at once. William was a hungry baby, demanding and loud, and Olivia sometimes felt like she was drowning in the sheer responsibility of keeping this tiny person alive. But Austin was there, walking the floors with William when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, looking at their son with such wonder and love that it made Olivia's heart ache. Janet and Jim doted on William like the grandchild they had never had. Janet made him tiny clothes and knitted blankets, while Jim carved him wooden toys that he would not be able to use for years. The ranch became a place of laughter and new life, and Olivia marveled at how far she had come from the broken woman who had stumbled into Buffalo just over 2 years earlier. As William grew from infant to toddler, Olivia found herself thinking less and less about the past. It was not that she forgot what she had endured. Those memories were part of her, scars that would never fully fade, but they no longer defined her. She was not Thomas Kelly's victim. She was Austin Grayson's wife, William's mother, a valued member of the Double J community, a woman who had survived hell and chosen to live anyway. In the summer of 1880, when William was learning to walk and getting into everything, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the fear was less overwhelming. She knew what to expect now, knew her own strength. Their daughter was born in February 1881, a tiny red-faced girl they named Margaret after Austin's mother. Margaret was an easier baby than William had been, content to lie in her cradle and watch the world with solemn gray eyes. William, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything, which was as endearing as it was exhausting. The years rolled by, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. Jim's health began to fail when Olivia was pregnant with their third child, and he quietly made arrangements to deed the Double J to Austin, trusting that it would be in good hands. He died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1883, with Janet holding his hand. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had loved, and Janet stood dry-eyed through the funeral, her grief too deep for tears. She moved into the small house with Austin and Olivia, unable to bear the big house alone, and became an integral part of their growing family. The third baby, another boy they named James after Jim, was born in August of 1883. Then came another daughter, Ellen, in 1885. The house that had once seemed spacious now bulged at the seams with children and noise and life. Austin proved to be a natural rancher, expanding the Double J carefully and sustainably. He hired good men, treated them fairly, and built a reputation for honesty that brought buyers from across the territory. The ranch prospered, and with it, so did their family. Olivia sometimes stood on the porch in the evening, watching Austin teach William to rope or Margaret to ride, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this beautiful, chaotic, exhausting life was hers. She had built it from nothing, from the ashes of her old self, and it was more than she had ever dared to dream. Janet lived to see all 4 children grow, passing away quietly in her sleep in the winter of 1890 at the age of 78. They buried her next to Jim, united in death as they had been in life. Olivia grieved deeply for the woman who had become the mother she had never truly had, the one who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. The children grew and changed. William became a serious young man, devoted to the ranch and everything it represented. Margaret was wild and free, more comfortable on horseback than in a drawing room. James had his father's gentle patience and his mother's determination. Ellen, the youngest, was the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and made everyone laugh. In 1895, Wyoming became a state, and with it came new opportunities and new challenges. The wild frontier was slowly being tamed, and Olivia watched it happen with mixed feelings. She had loved the openness of the territory, the sense that anything was possible. But she also appreciated the increased safety and stability that statehood brought. William married in 1898, bringing his bride Sarah to live at the Double J. She was a practical girl from a farming family, and she and Olivia became close friends as well as family. Margaret announced her intention to become a teacher and moved to Sheridan to attend normal school, scandalizing some of the more traditional neighbors but making her parents proud. James showed an aptitude for working with horses that surpassed even Austin's considerable skill. He started a side business training difficult horses, and people came from miles around to bring him their problem animals. Ellen married young at 19 to a lawyer in Buffalo, and they built a house in town where Olivia and Austin visited often. The new century arrived, and with it came technological changes that transformed the way they lived. Telephones reached Buffalo, and then eventually the ranch. Automobiles began to appear on the roads, though Austin maintained that he would take a good horse over a mechanical monstrosity any day. Olivia was 53 years old when Austin woke her early one morning in 1905, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "Come outside," he said softly. "I want to show you something." She followed him out onto the porch, where the sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains. The valley spread before them, golden in the early light, and she could see their grandchildren playing in the yard of William's house nearby. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "Everything we built together," Austin said, putting his arm around her. 40 years ago, you walked into Buffalo with nothing. Look at what you have created." She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, and took it all in. The ranch, thriving and beautiful. The family, spreading across the valley and beyond. The life she had never thought she deserved but had claimed anyway. "We created it," she corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you." "You could have," he said with certainty. "You were always strong enough. I just had the privilege of being there to see it." They stood together as the sun rose higher, warming the valley, burning off the morning mist. And Olivia thought about the girl she had been, broken and terrified, who had believed she was unworthy of love. She thought about Austin's words all those years ago. "Everyone deserves love, especially you right now, today." He had been right. She had deserved love even when she could not see it. She had deserved happiness, safety, a chance to rebuild her life. And she had taken that chance and turned it into something beautiful. "I love you," she said, the words as true and necessary as breathing. "I love you too," Austin replied. "Forever." They had more years together, good years filled with the joys and sorrows that make up a full life. They saw their children married, their grandchildren born. They watched the ranch continue to prosper and evolve with the changing times. They grew old together, Austin's hair going white and Olivia's face gaining the lines of a life well lived. Austin died peacefully in 1923 at the age of 71, with Olivia holding his hand just as Janet had held Jim's. His last words were, "Thank you for letting me love you." Olivia lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, the matriarch of a family that numbered more than 30 people. She told her story sometimes, to the younger ones who asked, wanting them to understand that strength could be found even in the darkest places, that healing was possible, that love, when it was real and true, could transform everything. She died in her sleep in the spring of 1928 at the age of 76, and they buried her next to Austin on the hill overlooking the ranch. At her funeral, her children spoke of her courage, her kindness, her determination. Her grandchildren remembered her gentle hands and the stories she told. And the ranch she had helped build continued on, a testament to what one woman could create when someone believed she deserved love. The wooden finch Austin had carved for her so many years ago was passed down through the generations, a small reminder that even the smallest creatures could survive the harshest winters, and that come spring, there would always be singing. And in the valley where Olivia had found her redemption, her story lived on, whispered from mother to daughter, a tale of survival and hope, and the transformative power of believing that everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves to be loved.